I want to start by welcoming the writer and the director of the film you just saw, Margin Call. Please join me in welcoming J.C. Chandor.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
If you'd like to join the conversation or have a seat, there are some seats down here. Please come on in. J.C., welcome.
Thank you.
This film has a history with the Film Society because not only is it opening here, our first opening film after the 49th New York Film Festival, which concluded last weekend. The film opened New Directors, New Films in the spring. You may have also heard of its tremendous acclaim and the attention it received both at Sundance and then at the Berlin Film Festival immediately thereafter in February. What I found interesting in watching the film recently is the film can't help but get more and more relevant, given all the
Unfortunately, yes.
You couldn't have imagined when you wrote the film, and I understand you wrote it just in the wake of the collapse, 3 years ago now?
Yeah, it grew over about a year. The way I like to write is there's probably 5 or 6 kind of key points that I start to work out how a story is going to work, and that's just kind of thinking about something. And then I finally sit down, and it's usually fairly quick, and I'll just actually, write the thing. So that event was after Thanksgiving of 2008. So, but it was building for a year sort of before that.
And I was thinking you couldn't have imagined how relevant it would be. I'm sure when you wrote it, you couldn't have imagined that it would ever get made. It's a challenge to get an independent film made today. Let's dig into that a bit, but let's just start with what struck you about this idea, or what was the idea back in Thanksgiving of 2008 in the wake of, take us back to 2008, what was going on then, what was going on in your head specifically? We know what was happening in the financial sector, but what were you thinking about?
The idea for the sort of first idea actually came in about 2006 or late 2007, and then, I guess it was just an event. So I had was trying to get rich myself, and I love historic buildings in New York City, so I had put together this little group. I was a television commercial director, and I'd put together a group of like 4 or 5 people to buy a little building, actually, bizarrely, and we went out into the world, and a bank gave us a silly amount of money to buy a building, which would never happen today, but the bank gave us this money, and we went and bought a building, and basically about a year into the project of trying to renovate it into homes to live in, it was an old, rundown, sort of historic commercial building. A godfather of one of the people in the group, basically, we'd been getting offers to buy it off of us, and he basically came and told us to take the offers. And he knew it was his godson's sort of dream to kind of do this project. He was an architecture student, and it was a big deal for him. And so there were other reasons, and we ended up selling the building, the partnership. We were way in over our heads. This is the real reason we sold the building. But fast forward about a year and a half later, and the world literally starts falling apart. And I had known that gentleman had made other decisions in his life that were very significant. In real estate, you sort of put, as we all know, if you buy a house, you put 10% down. So if you're buying a $100 million building, that's $10 million that you're putting down. So he was doing things like walking away from $10 million like hard deposits. Very severe actions, So looking back on that a year and a half later, the sort of general idea was, what is it like walking around with information that you really believe is fact, but it's not fact yet. You're about to intervene in other people's lives. He intervened in his godson's life, intervened in his own life, all the other people that were involved in his project, basically made the quote unquote bet that we were taking this hard turn. So it was this kind of fascinating nugget of like, what is it like to be the first person to know or think you know? And then my father had worked in this industry, not as a trader, but as a more sort of conservative investment banker, but still, part of an investment bank for 35 years. And I had lived in communities surrounded by other investment bankers, New Jersey, suburban New York, and London, England. And then I had moved to New York myself. And so my friends, a lot of them worked at one time or another in the business. Yeah, can everyone... Yeah, sorry, I've been talking a lot. So and normally I'm a loud guy, but so it basically those two things combined, and I felt like I knew these characters' voices, which is the hardest thing to do as a writer, is to actually write in the way people talk, whether it's a bus driver or a whoever, and I had these voices, and then thought I kind of had a hook, which was go to where this might have started. And the way I originally read it, the company that's marketing the film is doing a wonderful job, and they're really time stamping it. But if you actually go by the film, there are absolutely no time stamps, and they never turn on the, by it being at night, overnight, they don't care what's happening in Asia or in Europe at that point. They know they're the first people to know this. So there's no need to turn on the television or anything. So for me, this film could have happened really 2 or 3 years, before the crisis. In a weird way, there were people panicking, quote unquote, leading up to that and making very severe decisions. And a lot of them lost their jobs because of it. If you got out too early and people for 2 more years were making a fortune, that was an issue. So I tried to keep the film sort of as universal as possible. But essentially, it came from a world, frankly, personally, I was at a place where I could not afford literally to go out and fully research sort of a whole new world, which is the way I like to write, is to actually understand what I'm writing about. And so this seemed like I might have a take on it that someone else may not.
Let me throw out one thought or one comment, and then I want to get to some questions from the audience. I was thinking about the fact that by putting a human face on this nondescript bank, we might think of it and transpose, the name of other banks onto it, but because we now know what's happened a few years later. But by putting a human face on this bank and the people there, we also challenge sort of our own notions of the individuals who made the decisions that caused the crisis that happened, and that can be both humanizing, but it can also make you really angry about individuals. And when you have a face to that anger, it can make it a much more profound experience. At least that was my view watching the film. To what extent were you thinking about? And again, this is 3 years ago. So to what extent were you thinking about this idea of, because now it's talked about as a movie that humanizes the financial crisis. How do you respond to that as a writer?
Yeah, that was, for better or worse, a big reason why we almost didn't get the film made, actually. So we had a chance to make the film, and this cast was drawn to this script from very, very early on, much earlier on than any other thing I'd ever written. And so in this... I sort of put it out to a couple producers in the early spring of 2009, and by the summer of 2009, we had an amazing cast, very similar to this. Unfortunately, besides Zachary, not many of the same actors that ended up in it, but an amazing cast. But it was 2009, in the summer of 2009, and no one, people were a little worried about their money and a lot of other things. But we had the chance to make the film. If Zachary Quinto's character, who is Peter, the sort of analyst guy, if he had essentially turned in Spacey or Irons, or the Jared Cohen character, Simon's character. So they wanted the film to end with a perp walk, because that's the way this film needed to end. And so I knew enough about why the actors had signed on in the first place. And I knew enough what I didn't know, but I strongly believed that for the first time, there is always sort of corruption, flat out criminal activity, I should say, on the parameters of every industry, and the banking industry is no different. But I was trying to write about the heart of it, the sort of center, which is you don't get sort of potential global, financial Armageddon without it being a systemic problem. It's not sort of a criminal activity. It's a potentially an ethical ethical issues, but from a criminal standpoint, as we stand here 3 years later, there's a couple people that have been thrown away, but those were just run-of-the-mill liars and cheaters. It's not been something that you would have thought would have been there. And so I felt that was not going to happen, and that it also kind of let the air out of the story we were trying to tell. And so we wanted to humanize the people. That was the whole point. And by doing that, it's not apologizing for decisions that people made interestingly, the decisions that the people are making in this film, Jeremy Irons' character, by all rules of CEO stewardship and stock ownership and capitalism, is absolutely right. Like, they have knowledge that the rest of the marketplace does not have, and their company will go out of business if they don't do something about it. So he has a mandate to do something. Now, for the 5 years leading up to this, did Jeremy Irons' character make a bunch of terrible decisions, some of them completely unethical, and absolutely. But these weren't, it was important for me that these aren't actually, penny pushing stock traders. The people Paul Bettany is talking to are other educated buyers. So now eventually they all know someone is going to get burned, and burned very, very badly. But in their logic, and really the logic of the system, Jeremy Irons is 100% in the right. At that point, it is not illegal to sell that. There are people willing to buy within normal rules what he's selling. So that is fascinating to me, that the guy who's actually the most sort of pure evil is actually right in the movie that you're seeing. And hopefully that allows both sides of this sort of discussion to look at it in an interesting way.
So we have in the room what is one of the first paying audiences to see this movie.
Yes, thank you very much.
I'm really
There's been a lot of people who have gotten free showings of this, so I'm glad you guys actually forked something. Yeah, so I'm glad you forked something.
As a result, I want to hear what they have to say. Yeah. Let's take a question from the woman here in the center with the red. We're bringing a microphone to you so that everybody can hear you.
I thought the film was amazing. The directing, the acting, the photography. It was really terrific, and I love films.
Thank you very much.
And I don't also rent them. I always love to go to the theater. But there's just a little slant, a disagreement on what you said about nothing was criminal, there was ethics or morality. Yeah. But if you're basically selling something that's supposed to be worth something, right, a car, and you know that the car is going to break down, right, and you say, this is a great car, the engine is good and it's going to run, you purchase it, and then it's no good. Isn't that sort of a criminal act a little?
Interestingly, with a car...
I shouldn't have, maybe there
No,
was
no, it's a great conversation. Interestingly, in a car, that's absolutely correct. But if you are another financial institution buying from another financial institution, you admit that there is no one to police you, essentially. You can buy, quote-unquote, insurance, you can buy other things, but by the only transactions taking place in this movie are between one institution and another institution. And each of those institutions are responsible to take care of how they got their money themselves. And they're supposed to be educated buyers, essentially. So the criminal means that, trust me, if you don't think our current administration wouldn't have loved to have had a couple good old-fashioned perp walks to sort of show that they were doing something, they would have. And so it's highly, I'm not saying it, so let me pull back for a sec. What I'm not saying to you, I think it maybe should be, the regulations do need to be put in place. I'm not arguing that, but what I'm saying is these people at the point of this movie being made got to go to sleep every night 100% sleeping under the blanket of I'm selling to an educated buyer who needs to know better.
Yeah. Had a relationship with the people they were calling. And they I heard them on the phone saying, I'm, losing something, but you're going to be gaining something. Why don't you buy this? That's a lie.
Because interestingly, you hide behind the fact that you don't know. In the markets, Paul Bettany in the movies, in the car, basically says, and it is not just rhetoric. He literally says, we could be wrong tomorrow. We may have made this bet too early. And that is justification. It's a totally appropriate justification. There are people, and the other thing, just to let you know, it's a trap, and Spacey's character, again, is actually wrong. When he says worthless, they're not worthless. They're only worthless to people within the markets, because if something doesn't have a price to these guys, the minute there's a period of time where something that you own doesn't have a price, it's worthless, because they're dealing with mortgage-backed securities, which were supposed to be sort of the highest, sort of one of the highest calibers of sort of things that you can, securities that you can deal with. It's McDonald's, and in the old days, the last thing anyone ever stopped paying was their mortgage payment. So that made it a very secure investment. So the interesting thing is they are, again, sleeping under the blanket that they could be wrong. They just sold something that was worth $100 at $80, right? And holy shit, what if tomorrow it's worth $100 again? I just gave you $20 because I'm a chicken, because I'm an idiot. So that fear of a downside is what makes them, rightfully so, if you believe in the market. This is the way the market works. It's scary, right? But the price goes like this. So a book of houses, if you take 100 houses like this, you got a book of 100 houses, mortgages, all over the place, which is essentially what we're talking about. That's never worthless. Spacey's absolutely wrong. It's not worthless, that's the word we all throw around. It's worthless to them, but it's still a piece of property in a house. So at some point, if you believe in land ownership, that thing that they're talking about, the pile of crap, will eventually be worth something. But the fear is no one knows what it's worth.
Okay, just one other thing,
Yeah.
and then I'll go. Just one thing here. This is important because what you said that, land is worth something. Right. Standard & Poor's gave a wrong rating on
Now
these
that's
things.
a whole.
Wait a second.
Excuse
These
me, ma'am.
people-
Actually, just wait a second. Okay? There are other people. So Standard & Poor's is nowhere in this movie, right?
But it was land. You were actually talking about land worth something, and
Right.
it more.
We got it.
Okay, but anyway, it was a wonderful film. It was a great
No, I'm just
film,
saying,
and I enjoyed it very much. And
Just so you know, the
very
film is
talented.
not saying there is no criminal activity in the world. These are characters.
We'll go here, and then we'll go back. Yep, right behind you, Matt, over here. We'll go here, and then we'll go back. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, as a former proprietary trader at JP Morgan, I want to congratulate you because I thought it was a very realistic portrayal.
Get out of here. We
actually,
hate you. No,
yeah.
just kidding.
I thought it was the best movie about the financial industry since Wall Street. But I would offer you two moments where I was disappointed in the film. Overall, I
Please.
thought it was excellent. That speech in the car on the Aston Martin on the way back, where Bettany is giving the talk about how we're propping up the mortgages. I wished that was better explicated, because I think one of the real untold story, the real untold story of all this is how individuals speculating on their mortgages are much more responsible for what happened and why the banks collapsed than what has been portrayed. So that's quibble number one. And then quibble number two was at the end when Jeremy Irons is having breakfast with Kevin Spacey and giving this whole, well, it's all just money, it really doesn't matter. That's not really the speech that I feel like he would have given at that moment. He would have given the fiduciary duty speech about how the hundreds of thousands of shareholders in our company are depending on us to make the right decisions. So many people's pensions and livelihoods and retirements are based on the value of this share price. We owe it to them. That's the speech he would have given, not this, oh, it's just money, who cares?
No, and I think the interesting thing about the Irons' character, I agree with you, frankly, but that character, for me, it's interesting. I guess you're actually probably right, because if it's the speech you're talking about is what I just said right here. So you're probably right. But you can be wrong as a writer and director sometimes. But the interesting thing as a movie, it's also just a movie, and so the fun thing is, but it's only an hour and a half of your life. So, but you've done stupider things than that for an hour and a half. But but no, the element that he's, it was a nice opportunity. Essentially, that character for me was always a little bit on the edge. I like Jeremy came and I don't know, some people within the banking community noticed like he's wearing a button-down shirt instead of a stiff collar shirt. His haircut, I basically walked in and stopped his haircut halfway through so that he was a little, and there was the former governor of New Jersey, John Corzine was, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, and he's an old Marine guy, a very serious guy that on a lot of different levels, and he had a beard as the as the CEO of Goldman Sachs, and that hadn't been done in a while. And he was like, "Who the hell is going to tell me to shave this beard? I think I look better with a beard. I'm going to have a freaking beard." And so there's a little bit of that in Jeremy Irons' character where this has become a little bit more his kind of which you play to the audience. You got to there's an audience to play to, and it's there's as equal a point that if you lose faith in money, if money stops coming out of the ATM, the world goes to hell pretty quickly, and that's essentially what he was saying there. So, my feeling was, now that I'm actually thinking about it to defend myself, Spacey and he, in my mind, kind of came up together. And so Spacey would have cut him off and said, "Shut the fuck up." I was there when they taught us that speech, and so that was what, I guess, thinking about it. He was trying to go deeper in his own weird way.
There was someone in the middle here, I think, with a gentleman right in the middle. Hi.
Why are there so many extreme close-ups in the film?
Because we shot it in a very small space. The film, I'm sort of teasing, but the film was made for $3 million over 17 days. Which is, we have not wanted to sort of put out there as an excuse about any film, because we're very, very proud of the film. But this was a low-budget film. It has a very big cast that sort of attached themselves, which was very, very exciting. But at the time, if we wanted to add more money to the budget, there were people started putting requirements on the story to basically start trying to alter the story. Can the Demi character make out with one of the guys and I'm not joking, I'm being dead serious. I don't think on the most stressful night of their life they'd make out. But sometimes, that's me responding, and then it's but sometimes when people are under, and you're like, Jesus, we're not gonna, so the film visually, we were playing with claustrophobia for sure. What we were trying to play with was that the background, the outside world, there's a couple times where I actually had to have the characters mention that there's really one main instance. Zachary Quinto's character sort of says, "Look at all these people walking around," where he actually does sort of talk about the fact that people are looking at them. And you need that as an audience member, because if you don't have that at all, it's it's too much. But visually, we had the world behind them kind of open up, and hopefully what I was trying to, and occasionally, staff members would kind of pop it up, and so, I think it's supposed to be a bit claustrophobic, but we did our best.
So we'll go to the gentleman here and then the woman in front. I think I can do it. We need the microphone just so this is being recorded so people can hear.
First, thank you. It's a terrific movie.
Thank you.
You didn't have 2 or 3 great actors, but you had 5 or 6 and 2 or 3 great directors. Because it's the Film Society, could you speak to that?
Absolutely.
And then the answer that it's just a movie is a great answer to be used at other Q&A.
Yeah, I've been saying it to myself as you're sort of worrying about all this. But yeah, obviously, I've been a commercial director for going on, and documentary and anything else that do to give you a couple bucks. So I've been at this a long time, but it clearly never worked with an actor sort of this caliber, or certainly of this level experience. Penn Badgley is the youngest actor in the movie, who's supported himself and certain members of his family for 10 years of his life already as an actor. He's been a professional actor since I think he was 13 years old. And so there was nobody with less experience, you know, at this sort of level than I was. The nice thing is, as a writer-director, you have an immediate leg up because you know the material, and then the subject matter obviously gave me a tremendous leg up as well, you know. So and the fact that was 36 years old when I did it and not 26 years old, and the fact that my wife had given birth 12 days before we started principal photography due to some horrible scheduling that just had to unfortunately had to be the case. But all sort of joking aside, I kind of had waited a long time for this opportunity, knew the exact film I wanted to make, and the neat thing about the actors in it, none of them were sort of there for the money. We had set up a very nice situation to shoot a movie, and that whole film was shot, about 85-90% of that film was shot in one building, and most of it on one floor. So we were acting most of the time, they were. And so they, you know, Stanley Tucci, the Stanley Tucci's stoop scene was my first day ever on a feature film, which was a very challenging day. And guys like that and gals like that pick up on the fact if you know what you're trying to do, and that's all they kind of care about, because they know that they're going to do all right, you know. And as long as you know what you want from them and you tell them, some people wouldn't react that well, but everyone we had here to a T was there for the right reasons. And so, you know, this amazing kind of kumbaya thing happened, which was awesome. And it can go, I've worked on a lot of movie sets in a lot of different positions, and it doesn't always go that way for both the actors and the director. But, you know, I had waited long enough that I almost didn't care that it was Kevin Spacey. You know, I was like, I've worked with a lot of actors in my day, and a lot of them are less talented than this guy, so I should be able to get something half decent out of him. And, you know, and that was sort of my thoughts.
Couple more. Hi. Yes.
Well, my question was also about the cast. You essentially said that you've gotten two great casts. You had the first one, and then obviously in the process it changed. How did you go about casting, and why do you think you were able to attract such talent? Not that you aren't equally talented, but I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, Zachary's company called Before the Door came on very early, so he has two partners who are amazing. So part of it is just straight perseverance. You have to every day sort of lobby for it. And once Zach's company had kind of put their stake in it, and I knew this was kind of my last gasp to a certain extent professionally, you know, I was putting most of my chips on this piece. So you kind of don't accept no for an answer to a certain extent, but you have to have a script. So the script was a very nice little document. It was 91 page. I've been at this a long time, so there's tricks, you know. So it's a 91-page document. It reads very quickly, and it's bizarrely suspenseful, which is kind of what the film ended, and no one thought it would be. And most scripts have to be 120 pages long because there's silly rules for that, you know. It's a page a minute and all these ridiculous things. So my first cut of this movie was 2.5 hours long, and it was only a 90-page script. So that kind of, and you're lucky you didn't see that version of the film. But it, you know, you get them to read it, and that's the hardest part if you've written something that's sort of attractive to actors. And so we were able to get people to read it. And then they come and meet with you, and you know, you have to sort of convince them that you can actually pull it off. And interestingly, actors, especially actors who have been directors, you know, look at my commercial reel, which is really, really long and like a lot of varied, weird things on it. So they know like it's not going to be a total train wreck. The guys like come in on time and delivered something before. And then finally, it's a total leap of faith. You know, they have no idea. No one does. You know, the investor doesn't when you've never done that before. You know, an hour and a half is a long time to keep people's attention. So, you know, they had faith in the whole team that was putting it together.
Now, I know you're doing another Q&A tonight downtown, so how much, do you have a couple more minutes? Or
I don't know. What time is it?
It's about 8:20 now.
8:20. I think we're all right.
Okay, we'll do just one or two more, and then we've got to let him get downtown. So why don't we go over here in the third row?
I'll try and keep my
answers
answers
if you just
short.
wait for the microphone.
As you guys can tell, not only do I like to write long seeds, but I like to talk them too.
I'm used to seeing Simon Baker as the mentalist. Yes. And he's this sweet, flirty, just the guy everybody loves to love. And it was a little shocking, to see him in that role. The other guys were kind of, Tucci and everything. They were a little grubby looking, after being up all night, the beard and all that. And he was so sparkling, and yes, literally. And so that was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the fun thing, if you got 7 people or 8 people dressed up in formal attire, to try to create a different characters where you don't have to have them constantly telling you, if you had all those people constantly telling you about their stupid dying dog, you'd start to be like, all right, I get it, the guy with the girlfriend who just broke up with him, and like, you just can't do it in sort of the type of story I was trying to tell. So interestingly, I don't think most people pick up on it, but I think it affects you. Each person, when they walk on screen, there's a different thing kind of happening. And so his character, it's written in the script, is, that whole scene that he'd literally go through an entire new outfit change, shaving and starting the day afresh, tells you a lot about that character, and the fact that you then put a scene around it is a little twist. But Simon, like all of these guys, you don't become sort of the star of your own television show that you own 30% of by being like the happy-go-lucky mentalist guy. so he's a pretty serious guy, and I met him and I was like, holy, like he can walk in there and take over a boardroom, and then when somebody more powerful than him walks in, disappear. And that's, in a weird way, what Simon, I think, I love that performance. I think he, killed that. When he's the biggest dog in the room, it's like there's no one else around, but he knows when it's not to his benefit to even be noticed, and he just disappears.
Let's just do a couple more quick ones and we'll let you go. Yes?
Mine is just a very basic logistical question. Why such a limited release in New York City?
Because I didn't have someone get carried away in handcuffs. That's the simple answer. So it's scary to release a film that doesn't have a classic villain. So movies are supposed to have a villain, and they're supposed to have a good guy. Zachary's character, and this is not like some grand statement, but like Zachary's character should not have taken that job, So as a distributor, it's scary, man, because audiences don't want to see the person they've been kind of paying attention to go back into the teeth of of hell, or what you've built up to be hell. And so, I think it is taken, but it's spreading. It's going to 60 cities next week, and it'll be all over Brooklyn and all over the suburbs. Like, I don't want to complain, but there's still a philosophy, I think, that you kind of build momentum, So I don't get it. This is my first rodeo in this front, so. No, I meant it's going all over. Like, it's going to Brooklyn. Like, it'll play in 2 or 3 theaters in Brooklyn. It's playing in the suburbs. The little town in New Jersey that I grew up, the local theater has it next weekend, which is exciting.
We're really almost out of time. Yes, here.
Couple of comments. First of all, I thought the last speech by Jeremy Irons was perhaps the most important speech.
Exactly.
Not because it's the truth right. that we've all seen, and it's the deep, dark truth. I also like what you said about the film being timeless, because maybe in 2014, the film will be just as current. Elizabeth Warren.
Well, it's about a crash. I mean, that's the fun thing. Like, it's just tragic that it was people's homes and it was the banking system destroying themselves. But it's essentially just a bubble movie. It could have been Tulips or Railroad or whatever.
I think that it's more than that, because it's about a mindset. What are our 99%ers talking about all over the country now? It's about a mindset, and he goes through all these years, and he mentions 1937 and 1984 and. Maybe not 84, maybe that was Orwell.
No, that was
confusing
good
it. But,
Reagan, baby.
But anyway, and he mentions all these times, and he says, well, it's just, it's the same old thing. The percentages haven't changed, although they have, as we well know. And nothing has changed, even with Elizabeth Warren's efforts and Obama's efforts, whatever they are. Nothing's changed, and I think it is timeless. Because we're still in this time.
Nothing's changed. I would argue, Demi Moore's character now in a boardroom, if you walked into Citibank, that character has a much bigger seat at the table than it did. So some things have changed, but you know, if there's systemic issues, you know, I don't know. I'm not smart enough to answer that. I do actually.
We have to let
Thank you
JC
for coming.
get downtown. Thank you very much.